And it's my pleasure to sit here in this spot where I used to be the mayor of this fine city, and so it's kind of fun to be back in this spot. But tonight we are welcoming all of you to our forum, and this forum is co-sponsored by the North Metro Mayors Association, the Twin Cities North Chamber of Commerce, and the I-35W Corridor Coalition. And our goal in sponsoring tonight's legislative candidate forum for Senate District 42 is to provide you and the rest of the citizens in our city with the opportunity to learn about the candidates' ideas and positions on issues that we believe are important to the future of our communities. And I know that they are visiting you at your homes and knocking on your doors, but sometimes that's not just enough time, so we're going to share a few of their ideas with you this evening. Unfortunately, tonight's forum will be shortened due to the withdrawal of the Senate candidate, Candy Sina, and we did not include any of the candidates from 42B because their district is east of us and does not include the Chamber or the North Metro Mayor's membership cities. But in lieu of the question and answers, Senate candidate Isaacson will have 5 minutes. And we're going to juggle that a little bit because he'd love to have questions from the audience. So if you have a question out there, we'll cut his speech down a little bit and allow you to have some questions from him. But right now he has the opportunity to introduce himself and to provide his comments.
Thank you. Hi there. My name is Jason Isaacson. I'm the state representative from 42B, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for including me and giving me a chance to share a little bit about my campaign and what I hope to do in the upcoming legislative session. The last 4 years have been a real interesting learning experience for me, and I definitely found that I've evolved a lot as I got to know a lot of different people and had the opportunity to be of service to a lot of different groups, especially when it comes to homelessness and housing, education, and really working on the manufacturing sector of our economy as the outsourcing that we have done both on the business level and the way we have steered away from vocational education in K through 12 has really proven to be disastrous for parts of our economy, especially in rural Minnesota. So my campaign is really focused on 3 tenets. First, and perhaps for some folks most importantly, I was the only member, and I want you to think about this, of either party in either body to offer a middle-class tax cut last year. Let that sink in. The only member to offer a $500 million tax cut to the middle class. Because I figured if we're going to be talking about tax cuts, it should go back to the people that paid for it. And so as long as we have a surplus, I will continue to offer those tax cuts for the middle class. I am convinced that there is a kind of middle-class donut hole that's being created that's really putting the folks that are getting in the middle class paying our bills being squeezed. The folks that have a lot of money, they're doing fine, and the folks that need some help, we have some programs for them, but we're not providing any support to the middle class, and that's something that I think we need to do more of in this state. Secondly, I'm focused on education. I want to make sure the quality is good when we're talking from graduation down, and I want to make sure access is possible when we're talking about after we graduate. More specifically, I want to make sure that we begin to value vocational education at the same level that we value a 4-year degree. We have to simply say that when a person's leaving high school, if they want to be a precision welder or a philosophy degree, we want to encourage that, want them to be successful, give them the training they need so they can go out and find a job and a career that they're proud of. Finally, my concern is when we look forward to the next session, how are we going to handle transportation? I think that's just a vital problem that has been kicked down the road now, and we really need to take a second to look at what do we have to do to create a sustainable transportation solution. For too many years, we have starved the DOT and put them in a position that they cannot win. And then we ask them to do a lot of different programming in terms of the types of roads they need to take care of, and with the 35W bridge collapsing, it changed our entire focus and became much more safety focused. And as you know, I've been championing this bridge over in Rice Street that I thought I had. I voted with Republicans on the bonding bill to get that bridge passed, and the governor vetoed it, which was made me a little bitter. But you know what? We're going to come back and we're going to try to get it next time because we need to support the people and the businesses and the employees that work in that area and give them an opportunity. I'm a father of 3. I have a 3-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and a 1-month-old at home. I do not get very much sleep. My wife is a saint for letting me continue to run for office. It's been a wonderful opportunity. We are knocking doors. I've raised a lot of money. We've hit over 15,000 doors in Senate District 42 between our volunteers and our candidates. 15,000. 100,000 doors, and I think we're going to double that by the end of this campaign, because it is our goal to reach out to every single person that we can. And what I tell folks, if you're going to vote for me, I appreciate your trust. If you're not going to vote for me, I hope you will still call on me, because my job is to represent the entirety of Senate District 42, not just the people that vote for me. And it's my job to make sure I work for you no matter what your political stripes is. So thank you for your time. I'm not going to take up too much time, and hoping that if there's any questions, you'd feel free to ask.
Are there any questions out there? Comes Bob Benke.
Is my clock going now, or no?
Bob Benke on the runway here. Thank you.
On the runway.
Should the Metropolitan Council be forced to have local city representatives on the council?
Wow, we're not messing around, are we? Okay. I am open to that concept. I think that there's a lot that needs to be discussed when we're looking at the Met Council, and I'm a little wary when we talk about changing it, because unfortunately the partisan divide in St. Paul is so bitter that it creates this kind of either-or scenario where it's an all-or-nothing solution to something. Either we're going to change the Met Council completely, or we're going to leave it exactly the same. And one side will dig their heels in one way, other side dig their heels in the other way. Does the Met Council do really good things for the metro area? Absolutely it does. I make no apologies about the work that they do in helping us save money. However, are there some things we could do better, or might be better locally accountable to? I think that's a possibility. And so I'm open to that possibility, but that would take way more than I have right now to explain. So I really couldn't say for sure that I would support that yet. But I'm not opposed to it 100%.
Is there another question out there? Maybe you and I can talk about the Met Council, because that used to be one of the hot buttons when I was mayor, too. So.
Oh, let's talk some more about the Met Council, please.
Yes. Yes, Brenda.
There seems to be a lot of support for youth when they're troubled, when they're younger, and then when they're older, but you kind of miss the gap between 13 and 17 when they really need mental health and all of those issues. And the legislature seems to always go to the youth or to the young adults, but we miss that gap. What, do you have any ideas on that, or have you looked into any of that?
On a personal note, I've been involved and been given awards by the Boys and Girls Club of America, which works with youth in that range of ages. But I think that you're right that in some ways we kind of get after some of the youngest among us, and then we kind of look at people again once they're adults and dealing with jobs. And I think we need to have a more comprehensive plan that starts with looking at what can we do to help people guide through. If you're talking about, especially if you're thinking about inner city or kids that are dealing with, like you said, mental health issues, you know, I don't know that our schools are providing the support they need to be providing right now, and I think, frankly, partly because we starve them in some ways, and then partly because money is being spent in areas that aren't as positive in what we could be accomplishing. So I think that in my time I worked for a nonprofit called The Link, and my job was to help teenage urban youth find jobs and coach them in their interview skills and help them locate where they could be applying for jobs and get them hooked up with Subway and other groups, and I would go pick them up at their home, and that kind of stuff was, you know, where I was on the ground making that kind of a difference. It's a little harder when we think we're going to legislate some of those things, because people think we're legislating into the areas of parenthood. And that becomes sticky, because I really can't tell a parent how to parent their kids. And so kind of mandating that becomes difficult. So we can provide services, and I don't know if at the high school level we're doing what we can do to help them transition into adulthood. I definitely think we're not giving them the tools they need when it comes to basic things from writing checks to understanding how money balances, that kind of stuff. We need to do more of that.
Well, thank you very much.
You want to grill me? I'm ready. Let's do it. No? Okay.
Is there another question out there? I would like to know, since you're switching from being a representative to running for Senate, what was the high point of your being a representative? What do you feel the best about that you accomplished?
That I accomplished. I worked...
Or that you worked on.
Well, I worked very hard on two things. One was creating a program that did customized training that brought businesses together, small businesses together, with possible employees in an education, providing that the businesses paid a little, the employees paid a little, and the state helped cover some of the education to get people tooled for manufacturing jobs. We have just a glut of manufacturing jobs we can't fill. My very first bill that I got passed, it was kind of my big bill, my campaign bill, so to speak, ended up resulting in $5 million worth of salaries for people in greater Minnesota who are looking for manufacturing jobs. And I grew up with a family. My dad owned a manufacturing company. It was a small business. I sat at the kitchen table hearing about how evil OSHA was and how frustrating, small business regulations were, and I'm very sympathetic to that. So that's one part of it. If I don't mind me sharing an anecdote, when I ran for office, I ran to be a bruiser and a street fighter. My goal was to go in there and just mix things up and fight with Republicans all the time, right? And what I learned, interesting for me, was when I got there, some of my best friends are those Republicans on the other side of the aisle. And that it isn't the partisan divide you think or you hear about in the news. So one of the greatest things that I experienced in the legislature was really understanding that there's a lot of really good people on both sides that want to do good things for Minnesota, and that when you look at how the dysfunction comes when we start talking about how the elections are paid for on both sides of the realm, both sides, and the way leadership kind of divides us up into this all or nothing kind of thing. So I'm really, that's probably one of the biggest learning points I've had, is how to work bipartisanly and get along with others.
Well, thank you.
Thank
we
you
wish
for
you
your
the
time.
best of luck.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
And well, we're taking a small break here while we set up for the House candidates. And so we have 2 House candidates. I asked him to push the signs up because we can't see them.
Jim.
Thank you. Can we move this one way or the other so I'm not looking through it? That's good.
Okay. For the House candidates, we have 4 prepared questions. And the candidates did not receive those questions until just before we started this evening. So they're coming right off the top of their heads with them tonight. Responses will be in rotating order with 2 people. I hope I can keep track of that. And we have set time limits on their answers. We regret that we probably won't get to your question that you might want to ask, but we might have time for questions at the end of this. So write them down if you have a question, and we'll see if we can get to them. There will be other forums in the area from now until the election night. So if we don't get it tonight, I'm sure you'll find another one. I would again reiterate that this forum is sponsored by the North Metro Mayors Association, the Twin City North Chamber, and the I-35W North Corridor Coalition. So we have 2 candidates tonight. We'll start with the person on my right, which is your representative, Barbie Russo, and then we'll introduce Randy Jessup, who is the challenger on my left.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Barbie Russo. I'm the current state representative for District 42A, and I'm seeking re-election as the DFL-endorsed candidate. First of all, thank you to our hosts this evening, the mayors, the Chamber of Commerce, and the I-35W North Corridor Coalition. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to show your interest in the election, and to those who will be viewing it via cable. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve the communities of Arden Hills, Mounds View, Shoreview, and Spring Lake Park these last 4 years. When I was first elected, I promised to bring my training and experience as an engineer and an educator to my work at the legislature, and I've done that. I work hard in committee and on the floor of the House to improve education, advance renewable energy, protect our clean water, provide economic opportunity for all Minnesotans, and take care of our infrastructure and protect vulnerable Minnesotans. It's been rewarding to work with Arden Hills and Ramsey County on road and bridge projects to support the redevelopment of the Rice Creek Commons, with Mounds View to get sound walls to help some of its neighborhoods, and with Shoreview to renew its tax increment financing district. And also, the Met Council came up previously. I've worked with the Met Council to make sure our region is represented in their plans for future transit development. The best part of the job has been working with constituents to solve problems that they have working with government agencies like business licenses, health insurance, construction noise, and so on, and meeting with student and community groups. If re-elected, I'll continue to work for our communities to rein in college tuition increases, establish balanced, sustainable transportation funding, support job growth, and expand proven programs to address achievement gaps in education. I've got a proven record of delivering results for our communities and the people of our cities, and I hope that you'll trust me to continue doing so.
Thank you, Barb. Randy, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I want to thank the North Metro Mayors Association for this opportunity tonight. Thank you, Bev, for moderating for us. And just appreciate those in the audience for being here tonight as well. As Bev mentioned, my name is Randy Jessup. I'm a longtime resident of Shoreview. Lived in the district for 18 years with my wife, Jan. We've raised a family, 3 kids, and we have put them through the Mounds View School District. I am a small business owner. I own 4 UPS stores, one nearby down by Rosedale, one in St. Paul, and 2 in downtown Minneapolis. I've had the opportunity, this being our second time, actually, for Barb and I to go up against one another, to be out in the community and knocking on doors and touching base with a number of different folks. And it's always an encouragement to hear from people, to hear their concerns, but also to hear their successes and what is going well in our community. And there's a lot that's going well in our community. I think we're all proud of the Mounds View School District, and there's been some very encouraging signs, I would say, from folks just in terms of what they appreciate about their particular city that they live in. And that's been a great experience, to be able to connect with folks. I have not been in political office before. I am a newbie in that. I have done representation, however, though. While I've been a UPS store owner, we have 4,500 stores all across the country, and I became involved in representing owners with our franchisor as well as with UPS. So I went ahead and did that for 8 years, the last 4 as a chairperson. And I also chair my church's governing board over the last couple of years. So there's a couple of ways that I have shown some leadership, but I have not done so in a government role. Thank you again for being here.
Okay, now we move on to our questions. These questions have been prepared by the crew that put this whole thing together, and you have a 2-minute time limit with a very brief 45-second rebuttal. So let's start with Randy on this question, please. Randy, what are the top 3 issues you hear while campaigning? And if elected, what will you do to ensure that the 2017 Senate and House members work in a collaborative way with the governor and the community to address those issues?
Thank you, Bev. Well, I think the 3 different issues that I've heard about in different ways, one is taxes. People are always concerned about how much money is coming out of my family budget, and going for whatever it might be. So that's always a concern. And one of the issues that I've kind of brought to the forefront that I think has tapped in with a number of folks in our community is that Minnesota is one of 6 states that fully tax Social Security benefits of our seniors. And our community has 35 to 40% people that are age 60 and over. So this is a big deal. And when you look at this question, our neighbors around us, the neighboring states, do not tax seniors' Social Security benefits. Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota. And North Dakota does, just like us, to be fair. But their state income tax rate is 1% to 2.9%. It's very, very low. So, in essence, they're not being taxed much. Now, curiosity for all of you on this particular issue is that our population, the percent of us that are seniors in Minnesota, is around 12 to 12.5%. In all of the other states, it's anywhere from 13.5% to 15%. That's all the states around us. So it's not the weather just in Minnesota that's driving people away. There's something else, and I would say that that's because of our tax structure for seniors. So that's a big deal. A couple of the other issues that I would say, healthcare costs, I'm starting to hear about that. some concerns. It's growing significantly. And then also certainly our roads and our bridges.
Thank you. Barbara, top 3 issues that you hear while you're campaigning, and if elected, what would you do to ensure that the Senate and House members work in a collaborative way with the governor and the community to address those issues?
Thank you. I hear about education, first of all, from nearly everyone in the district. It's one of the main reasons people choose to live in our area, because we're blessed with 2 strong school districts, the Mounds View schools and a small neighborhood in the Roseville School District. I actually have a record already of working in a bipartisan fashion to solve some of our problems in education. I achieved reforming one of the skills tests that's needed for teacher licensure. We had a system of tests that did not work from many points of view, and it has now been replaced with one that is a nationally normed test and much more accessible for the people that need to take it. I'm also participating in a bipartisan legislative study group during the interim, volunteering my time to work on the ongoing problems of teacher licensure that were identified by the Office of the Legislative Auditor. I will work on trying to replicate programs that have been proven to work to help reduce the achievement gap, and that's a goal that's shared by many people in the legislature. Another thing I hear about is transportation, our need to fix our roads and bridges. We need to find sustainable, balanced, comprehensive funding sources in order to address the $6 billion backlog of projects that exists. And this is a problem around the entire state, and we do need to learn to work together. So I stand ready to do that, and I am on record with that. And then I do hear about property tax in particular. One of the things that we need to look at whenever we're talking about taxes is the entire total of taxes that are paid. Because if you just compare income tax to income tax, you miss the fact that people are also paying sales tax and property tax and so on. And it has actually been proven by survey that the number one reason people leave the state in their senior years is in fact the weather. And you can tell this because you know your friends and neighbors, when they move out, they don't go to Wisconsin, they don't go to Iowa, they don't go to North Dakota or South Dakota, they're going to Florida and Arizona and whatnot. And property tax has a much bigger impact on people who are on limited or fixed incomes because they have no control over those increases, it can lead to them not being able to stay in their home. Thank you.
Okay, we'll let you take a deep breath. And the next question, you have to listen carefully to this one. Business startups and some industries, like construction, are burdened with conflicting rules and regulations from overlapping agencies. Would you agree with that statement? And if you do, what would you change, if anything, at the legislature to address this idea?
Thank you. Yes, I had experience with that when I was working as an engineer. There was a plant location where they were replacing solvent tanks, and the local fire department wanted them to be below ground, and the environmental regulations wanted them to be above ground so they didn't leak into the ground, and they had a heck of a time resolving that between the two agencies. This is an area where sometimes the state representative gets involved because a business might come to our office to help us try to get in contact with the people and get them talking to each other so that you can resolve these conflicts. And although I'm happy to do that when I get the chance, I think we really ought to have more of that function in the Department of Commerce and in the Secretary of State's office to have people that work directly with businesses to resolve those conflicts when they arise.
Thank you. Randy, while your business isn't construction, but printing has its obstacles also, so what would you do? Well, first of all, do you agree with the statement that there are some industries, like yours even, that have regulations that are overlapping? Would you agree with the statement, and what would you change if you got to the legislature?
Well, I definitely agree, even though I may not be in construction. I definitely see differences in the way that I have to run my stores in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and certainly Roseville. First is sales tax. You definitely see that. And when we think about the regulations, I guess I'd like to expand the conversation, Bev, because we're also facing issues in terms of St. Paul and Minneapolis, adding sick or save time requirements, and now we're looking at the $15 minimum wage. And what are we going to do if one city starts to enact some of these and others do not? It's going to have some impact across the metro area. And I like to kind of quote, there's an editorial that was from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. It came out on Sunday. And it says here, the city's new sick and save time requirement and looming $15 minimum wage discussion are at odds with the drive to attract jobs and address racial disparities that Mayor Chris Coleman and the city council members claim to embrace. By making it more difficult to start and grow a business, this regulation will worsen the divide between the haves and the have-nots. I happen to agree with that. It says further in the article, meanwhile, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is among advocates for a better approach, preemptive legislation that would prevent local governments from enacting harmful wage and benefit mandates altogether. Now, I don't know if that is quite the right approach, but I do think that we want consistency among the cities here in the metro area. Because quite honestly, if Minneapolis goes ahead and pushes through some of the efforts that they've got, there's one of my businesses I won't be able to retain. I don't make enough money to be able to pay my employees $15 an hour. And so if that happens, I will be forced to either close that business or move it out of the city. And what will the net end result be? It'll be less employees working in the city of Minneapolis. That's a problem.
Thank you, Randy. Now, given the labor market mismatch today between recent graduates and employers' needs, what would you do as a legislator to address this supply and demand challenge?
I think this is a fascinating question that hits for me, Barb and Bev, on a personal level. And I'll mention it this way. My second son is Micah. Micah went to school. He went to college at Bethel and also Crown, and it didn't work out for him. He didn't like the academics. And so it was a matter of, okay, what's next for Micah? And he decided, you know what, I kind of like Delta, and I kind of want to work for this company. So he's began working kind of as a contractor at this point, working for Delta. And as he's been there, he's learned about a program that's offered through MCTC in combination with Delta. And it's essentially a 3 or 4 year program. I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure because he's got a lot of credits that transfer over. But it'll be a college degree and it'll be a mechanics degree. It's offered through MCTC, but he takes the classes essentially on the campus of Delta at the airport. Those are the types of relationships that we need to establish more and more so between an educational facility as well as an employer. And I put that up on a personal level and I say, you know what, this is a win-win. This works. And quite honestly, whatever we could do to foster more of those, that's what we probably want to do.
Thank you. Barb, the same question. Given the labor market mismatch today between recent graduates and employers' needs, what would you do as a legislator to address the supply-demand challenge?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that the kind of program that Representative Isaacson has supported at the legislature would be one of the things that Randy would favor. I've been behind those efforts also to support programs that link employers with training programs, employers with recent graduates, to establish the kinds of training programs that are needed in our Minnesota State colleges, former MNSCU system. I've also had conversations and visited the training facilities of some of the trades in our area and learned that there are quite a number of trades that you can come out with salaries as high as $60,000 a year, and they are making efforts to contact high school students and get them interested in these programs, and the legislature has supported some of those efforts. Our ongoing recovery should help with some of the mismatch. My son is in, one of my sons is in computer network systems, and he has told me about a number of cases where there are entry-level positions being offered that require experience that you can't get in that number of years, and salaries that don't match the expectations, because in many cases our businesses have not really quite caught up with the recovery, and so our ongoing economic recovery should help some of those. Thank you.
Next question. Both political parties agree that increased funding is needed for road and transit system improvements. How would you propose that those funds be raised?
I'm first, right? Thank you. This, of course, is the question about the gas tax or other taxes that might be raised or other sources of revenue, or whether our transportation funding should come out of the general fund. There's actually a variety of revenue sources that are currently dedicated to transportation, and there are some that can be used for that but are not constitutionally dedicated. The gas tax is one of the dedicated funds. We have automobile sales taxes, wheelage taxes for the counties, and the license fees. We have been talking about some other possible sources to add into that mix, dedicating more sales tax revenue to transportation needs, expanding the wheelage tax possibilities, even in the future talking about some kind of more direct usage tax to reflect the fact that we have more efficient vehicles that are using less gas per mile. That traditionally hasn't been a very popular thing in Minnesota. We don't really have toll roads in Minnesota. But the technology exists so that we could implement them in a way that in other states they have the iPass and things like that. But we have to overcome some hurdles for data privacy in order to get to that point. I think that the solution is going to be a mix of these revenue sources. I do not think the solution is to take the revenue we need for transportation purposes out of the general fund. The Speaker of the House was recorded speaking to a group this year that he favors no new revenue in order to, quote, starve out the general fund. Now, the general fund is where we get all of our money for schools, our parks, taking care of our elderly and sick people, and funding all of our government services. So a plan that doesn't include any increased revenue for transportation is a plan to starve out our schools. Thank you.
Randy, same question.
Thank you. This is probably one area where Barb and I would disagree. At least the prior position Barb has had is that we do need to have an increase in our gas tax. And I would say no to that. And as I look at our community, I hear from people that say, I want to preserve my family budget. I don't need more taxes. And I hear that particularly from some of our constituents that are not as well off and that use their car to regularly get from home to work. And if there's an increase in gas tax, that's going to take a bite out of their family incomes. And if you could correct me, Barb, if I'm wrong, but I think this gas tax that was proposed a while ago was on the wholesale level, meaning that as the price of fuel would go up, the amount collected in the tax would also increase. It's not a flat, let's say, 3 cents per gallon. This would be on the order of, if the price today, and I'm just giving a scenario, if the price today is at $2 and the gas tax is 5 cents, by the time it went to $3.50, if it ever did, it might be up to 12 or 13 cents. So that's even a bigger bite, and I don't think that's the right way to go. Quite honestly, I do like the idea of taking some sales tax that comes from auto-related, let's say, parts, tires, and so forth, and dedicating those towards transportation. I do like that, and I think we can satisfy our needs for the future. The other that I've brought up is, we've got this huge surplus that quite honestly continues to grow. I mean, we heard about it from our other representative about how the governor vetoed the tax and the bonding bill. Well, as a result, we have a lot more going into our surplus, and I think we should tap into that surplus as a down payment for our roads and bridges.
Barb, I see you scribbling furiously over here. Do you want to challenge his answer?
Yes, actually, I was wondering, we had said we were going to have rebuttals, but we
Yes.
haven't been doing them for
I
each
know,
question.
I'm sorry about that. But
Just before we start, what will be the format for that? Just so we know.
You have, according to my records, 45 seconds. But since we haven't been doing it, we'll give you a little bit longer than that.
Okay.
Let's give him 1 minute for a rebuttal.
All right, thank you. Well, first on that last point, since it's fresh in our mind, although I have supported some proposals that include a gas tax increase, I have never said that is the only solution. And we don't get the opportunity to vote on the bills we want to. We have to vote on the bills that are there. And what I want most of all is that we actually do something about our transportation funding. It's incorrect to say that we have a huge surplus that keeps growing and growing. There was talk at one point that it might be as high as $2 billion, but that was never actual money. It was a projected amount, and that amount in this past session we were dealing with was actually $600,000 because $600 million, excuse me, because $300 million is dedicated to the rainy day fund. And quite frankly, road construction costs are really directly related to petroleum costs because we do it with trucks and we put down asphalt. And as my colleague here knows as well as I do from chemical engineering, tar comes from petroleum. In terms of the preemptive legislation to prevent cities from enacting their own laws, we've got a long tradition of local control in Minnesota. If you like not having smoking in bars and restaurants, you can thank the city of Duluth for being out in the forefront and doing it years and years ago and showing us that the businesses did not collapse, people didn't stay away from the restaurants or the bowling alleys, that it succeeded. And so I'm really reluctant anytime we try to interfere with the ability of the cities and the counties to mind their own business.
Okay, Randy, do you want to challenge Barb on any of the previous questions? Going backwards, I'm sorry, I should have made that more apparent while we were discussing them, but do you have a further question that you...
I don't know if I have a further question, but I would just add some additional on this line. And I'd like to ask anyone out in the audience, when was the last time we had a major company that moved from some other state into Minnesota? Now maybe you've got a great idea on some company, but we've had, which one? Amazon. Okay. All right. Distribution. Okay. That's a very good one. Okay. But we have had a lot of companies that have moved out of the state, and that's been a difficult process for us. I think we are very much blessed to have some top Fortune 100 companies here. I just read about, and I don't know where this is going, but I am curious, and I'm putting it out there for all of us. The Shoreview Arden Hills Bulletin was out, and I picked up a copy yesterday. University of Northwestern is looking at the space, which is empty right now, for Smith's Medical. And that's a problem. We have lost a major supplier, employer out in the marketplace. What's very curious to me, and I don't have the answer here, but it mentions in the article that Boston Scientific is looking to downside and they may even move. If Boston Scientific moved out of our community, that would be a huge impact. I just put that out there for pause to say we have to be sensitive to the needs of the business community because they have options. And as we've seen in some other states, they move. Thank you.
I understand we have some questions from the audience. Thank you. All right, question. TIF is used to pit metro cities against each other for businesses. Would you be in favor of eliminating TIF in the 7-county metro area? TIF is tax increment financing. So let's go with you first, Randy.
I've not been in government, so I don't know that I'm covering it from all perspectives. But I have talked to a couple of the mayors that we've got in place, and I know that there was some tax, we'll say, exclusions given to Land O'Lakes in order for Land O'Lakes to expand here on their Arden Hills campus. And I think they use TIF. Am I right on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. They use TIF for that. Okay. Well, okay.
Way back when there was.
No, just recently.
Just recently was not.
Okay, I'm sorry, way back when.
So I apologize. I may not answer this question correctly, but I do appreciate the opportunity for a city to be able to flex with the county and to be able to give some opportunity to businesses to actually expand on their existing property. Now, there was no tax relief given to the existing structures, but there was some tax relief given to the additional construction that occurred. And I would be in favor of that. I think that's the benefit of the city as well as the community.
So you would be not in favor of eliminating TIF?
I would not be in favor of eliminating TIF,
Barb,
yes.
let me read the question again. TIF is used to pit metro cities against each other for businesses. Would you be in favor of eliminating TIF in the 7-county metro area?
Thank you. I think that we perhaps need to find a way to restructure it so that is not the way it is used. We had a situation in Shoreview where they had an expiring tax increment financing district and wanted to be able to renew it and use it exclusively to retain and expand existing businesses. Now, when I brought this issue up at the legislature, I got a lot of pushback from the tax chair at the time, Ann Lenchevsky, because she's not a fan of TIF for this very reason, that it pits the districts against each other. And it wasn't until we were able to convince her that Shoreview indeed is using it to retain and expand their existing businesses that we were able to get that across and help the city continue to grow their, excuse me, a lot of jobs that are really good living wage jobs and high quality jobs for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. I'm loving this question because this was my baby when I was on the council. There is growing concern about the Metro Council in the area. What is your view and what changes would you support? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Barb?
Thank you. Well, there are a couple of principal problems. The districts for the Met Council are quite large, and the representatives on the Met Council are appointees. And as a result, a lot of cities feel like the people that are representing them on the Met Council aren't necessarily in touch with the priorities and the needs of their cities and their communities. And there's kind of a general feeling about unelected officials. The other thing is that their terms all expire at the same time. And of course the districts get rearranged like every other district does with when we have a census every 10 years. So I think we could do a couple of things about this. One is find a way to make the terms staggered so you have more continuity on the Met Council, and that will alleviate some of the problems of people coming on board and it taking a long time to get up to speed on the very complex issues on the Met Council and help relieve the complaint that sometimes it's too staff-driven, where people have to rely too much on the opinions of the staff members. The other thing would be to find a way to have the nominees for these positions come from the cities and the counties, so they would represent the area, represent the concerns of those local governments, and confine the appointees to the list of the people that have been nominated. The current process consists of a list of nominees, and local legislators and other people can weigh in. I personally interviewed all 3 candidates the last time for our area, but it turns out that the appointee did not come from that list of nominees. And so I think there is some reform that we could do, both in overlapping the terms and finding a different way to nominate people. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy, do you have any ideas on that one?
Sure. I think the Met Council, when it was first conceived, had a much lower, smaller responsibility base. And over time, the amount of responsibility and I'd say control over decisions that involve the full metro have grown significantly. And as a result, I think at this point, because the decisions of the Met Council have such a larger impact upon us in the Metro, that these positions really should be elected positions. They should not be appointees. They should make sure that these positions, these people that are on this Met Council, actually are people that are voted into their positions. I like what Representative Urusa said about staggered terms. I think that makes absolute sense. We want continuity on the council ongoing. You just don't want everyone to all of a sudden be done and a brand new council come to fruition. But I do think these should now be elected positions, given the responsibilities of the Met Council.
Thank you. Next question. We have time for another question, do we? What should the state do to address climate change, and can you describe what effects climate change will have on the local area?
I think the key element has been worked on actually already, and that was, I want to say, during the Plenty administration, and Paul, you and Barb can correct me on this, but I know that Xcel Energy was given a mandate that so much of the energy that is supplied to the state would be by wind and solar rather than from petroleum or fuels, coal, whatever. And as a result, there's been great strides made. I want to say, and I could be corrected, but I want to say that Xcel gets somewhere on the order of 18 to 20% of their energy now from wind, and perhaps some also from solar. I think wind is the primary contributor to that. So there have been some efforts, I would say, that have already taken place, and we're going down that road already. And I think that's a huge encouragement for us all. And that's a huge contributor, I would say, to our overall pollution. I know that Xcel, I think, has shifted away from many coal power plants as well. And we have such an abundance of natural gas. That's an easy one for us to do. So I think we as a state have already taken some significant actions. Can more be taken? Absolutely. But we have had some foresight that we have been benefiting from for the last number of years.
Thank you. Barb?
Thank you. First of all, the original mandate was not specifically for wind and solar. It was for renewable energy as a whole. During the 2013-2014 session, when I was in office, we added a solar mandate onto that. One of the things that happened with that was Xcel Energy has discovered that wind and solar energy are really quite cost-effective as part of the mix of sources to produce electrical power. Contrary to the predictions of many, many people who thought that this would just make energy more expensive for everyone. Minnesota has no fossil fuel sources of our own. So every time we burn coal, natural gas, or petroleum, we're sending the money out of state. And so it's good business for Minnesota to continue to develop our renewable energy sources. We have solar energy hardware producers in Minnesota. We have farmers that are benefiting from siting wind energy and solar energy on their property. We have homeowners like me that are benefiting from putting solar energy on the rooftops, and people can participate in solar energy gardens. All of the actions about solar energy are things that we put into place in 2013, 2014. Some of the effects of climate change that we are seeing already are the increase in the severity of storms. And right now they're experiencing a lot of flooding in southern Minnesota as a result of the waves of rainstorms that we had coming through. This is affecting the communities because the roads have been flooded. They're not anymore at this point, but it also affects the farms. If you've got a crop in the field and you get a severe flooding incident like that, you lose your crop. We're seeing it in hotter weather in the summer sometimes, which is an increased health risk for people, especially people that have asthma or the elderly. And one of the things we need to do as a state, besides continue our work with renewable energy sources and recycling and conservation, is to plan for those events and make sure that we're prepared to deal with those kinds of consequences. Thank you.
Last question. Many highly qualified teachers will be retiring soon, leaving us with a shortage. What will the state legislature do to help recruit, train, and retain good K through 12 teachers? Barb, let's start that one with you.
Thank you. We have a teacher shortage already. It's not caused only by the retiring teachers. That is actually, that's a big factor. But we have real shortages in science and physics and chemistry, in industrial technology, career and technical education, special education, and some world languages. In many of these cases, part of the issue with those shortages is those are careers in which people will take a different job that pays higher and doesn't come with the stress and the difficulties of a teaching profession. Having been in both chemical engineering and industry and in teaching high school, I know the reality of that. But we also have a wider spread shortage, even in areas that we never experienced a shortage before. There are stories of districts not being able to hire a social studies teacher. And we used to get 200 to 1 applicants for every opening for positions like that. In some cases, this is because the district can't pay enough to compete with metro area districts. We have a lot less trouble with that here. But the other issue is that people who have been trained out of state are having a great deal of difficulty getting their teacher license in Minnesota. And also people that have been trained in Minnesota have had obstacles put in their path that haven't been resolved. And this is why I was talking earlier about being on the working group to try to resolve those issues. Teaching pay has not kept up with salaries in other fields. Minnesota's entry-level teaching salary has fallen behind the average for the nation. And in many ways, we're putting burdens on our classroom teachers that make the job less rewarding and more troublesome than it was in the past. Teachers like to teach rather than spend their time preparing for tests. And I need to have the support of support staff. Minnesota is actually one of the worst in the nation for our ratio of support staff like counselors and school psychologists. So we need to fix those things.
Thank you. Randy, do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Many highly qualified teachers will be retiring soon, leaving us with a shortage. What will the state legislature do to help recruit, train, and retain good K through 12 teachers?
Thank you, Bev. I think one of the key things that we have heard, at least through the media, that is a concern, and Representative Yarusso has already mentioned as well, is just the teacher licensing process here in Minnesota is rather difficult, rather onerous relative to other states across the country. And it's an area that, you know, just like businesses would like some red tape relief, I want to say the same is probably in the education field as well, is how can I be a teacher in Minnesota, particularly if I'm coming from some other state? What do I have to do? And the requirement's a little bit steep. Now, that said, I'm not a teacher. So what I'm going by is what I have heard from teachers, as well as what I have heard in the newspapers. And quite honestly, I'm just going to give a pass and say Barb has probably got more knowledge on this area than I do. But I think the whole area of licensing of teachers is one that should be able to be looked at in a bipartisan way.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our questions that we have prepared and the questions from the audience tonight. Thank you for those. So you now have 1 minute to wrap up your statements, something that you want to hit again or something that you didn't hit yet. So, Randy, you'll go first this time.
Okay. Well, thank you again for this opportunity. Bev, thank you very much for moderating. I think the one thing that I would like to leave you with is there's probably a couple of areas that would distinguish Barb and myself. One is on the area of funding for roads and bridges. I would not be for any gas tax in the mix of how we gain additional revenue for that purpose. And the other that I would push forward for all of you to consider is for our seniors. is repealing the tax that we have on their Social Security benefits. As I said, the percent of seniors that live in our state is lower than the percent of seniors that live in all of the states around us. Why is that? Well, the weather in all of these states is the same. Whether you move from Wisconsin to Florida or you move from Minnesota to Florida, we still have the same weather, as far as I know, as our neighboring state of Wisconsin. So it's not weather. It's related to tax. And I would say we need to do something about that. These folks have spent their whole lives benefiting, or I should say contributing, to Minnesota. We want them to stay here with their family, with their friends, and their ties to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Barb, 1 minute to wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you again to our hosts for the evening and to the people that have come to hear us. It's been an honor to be your representative for the last 4 years. I've especially enjoyed the chances I get to work with constituents and to work with our cities. I promise, like I said, I promised when I went to the legislature I would use my training and my experience to work hard down there. I've developed a reputation on my committees for working really hard and for asking good questions. And I will work on bills to make them better no matter who the author is, in spite of the advice of some people not to try to fix other people's bills. But I feel like my job really is to serve the people of my district and serve the people of Minnesota and do that work. The communities that we live in are blessed with tremendous school districts, wonderful infrastructure, wonderful parks and lakes, and I've been working to try to keep it that way, keep our Minnesota quality of life as high as it is, and represent you down at the Capitol and in your communities. I hope you'll vote for my re-election on November 8th, and you can find my websites at www.barbierusso.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Well, that concludes our forum for the evening. I want to thank everybody, especially Bob Benke and his committee that put the work into all the papers we got. Thank you. To the audience that was with us this evening, you were well behaved, and thank you for the questions. Lots of times we don't get questions from the audience, so that was wonderful that you gave us some questions tonight. To the cable staff here in City Hall, to the City of Arden Hills for letting us use City Hall, and thank you all just so much. And to our candidates, we wish you both the best of luck. So thank you for being here with us this evening, both of you. Thank you.